Hello everyone, I'm bringing you a video today talking about this. Now this is of course an example of the US Army's tropical rucksack used in the latter days of the Vietnam War. This is a topic which has been covered previously on YouTube by various people. The rucksack's been looked at in some detail previously. What I'm hoping to do in this video is take a really in-depth look at this, a close-up look at the various design features and so forth. So what we're going to do is look at it briefly on the mannequin as we have it packed out here to give you an idea of what it looks like this when it's being carried, and then also have a look at it on the blanket in a lot more detail, look at the various fixtures and fittings. The design itself was introduced to allow for, well, to provide for much greater carrying capacity compared with what had gone before. The carrying capacity of this is somewhat greater than the lightweight rucksack, and it's a lot better than the M1956 equipment, the basic M1956 equipment. And of course, rucksacks have been used extensively in Vietnam before the introduction of this in 1968. But this tried to go one step further in providing greater carrying capacity, and it also has extensive provision for stowage on the outside, so you can carry extra canteens, extra equipment and so forth on the outside of the rucksack, and it does fulfill that role quite well given the standards of the time. There have been a lot of work to develop kit specifically for use in the tropics during the course of the Vietnam War, which of course led to the M1967 equipment. You of course already had the lightweight rucksack, which was made of nylon. And you see the introduction of nylon canteen carriers for the 2-quart canteen and so forth. All efforts to produce lighter weight, load carrying equipment. Nylon also has other advantages as well, of course. It doesn't hold water weight in the same way that cotton does when it becomes saturated, and it dries a lot more quickly, so you don't gain weight from water when your equipment is made of nylon, at least not in the same way. And it's also rot proof when compared to cotton in the jungle. So various advantages there from using nylon equipment. And of course, all of this development would usher in the introduction of nylon equipment more generally with the Trials Link-Low system and then Alice. So it's an incremental step in the development of Alice and the introduction of nylon equipment to the US Army more generally. And that sort of presaged the introduction of nylon equipment to Western armies. From that point on. I think the US was certainly one of the first, although East Germany, interestingly, of course, had been using nylon equipment for quite some time, since the earlier 1960s, in fact. So just an interesting point there, I guess you could say. But they were pretty much an outlier amongst the Eastern Bloc countries for using nylon. Most continued using leather or leather substitute equipment, of course. But getting back to the main topic of the video here, to talk a little bit more about the tropical rucksack. As I say, we're going to look at it briefly on the mannequin, talk about the general design, and then have a look at it in a bit more detail. So the basic design feature of this is one large compartment here under the main flap, closes with a draw cord as well, and then you have 3 pockets across the front here, and it's sort of a development of the Arvin pack in that regard, which only had 2, so you end up with a 3rd pocket in the middle. The Arvin rucksack had of course been designed for use by the Arvin, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the South Vietnamese army basically, and that was made of a cotton canvas, a cotton duck material. And the basic design was used to influence the design of the tropical rucksack to some degree. It does share some of the features. The frame, for example, is basically cross-compatible between the two. So it draws on that previous design which had been produced for the Arvin, of course was used to some degree by US troops as well, those who could get their hands on them, because it was quite a good design of rucksack. So you've got that main body there, the 3 pockets around the front here, and we'll have a look at the various fixtures and fittings in a bit more detail when we look at this in just a moment on the blanket. And we have, as you can see here, a strip of webbing around here, nylon webbing with eyelets in it, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well. That's part of the external stowage. To talk a little bit more about that, we'll turn this round now. We'll have a look at the left-hand side, we'll have a look at the straps coming over the shoulders, and then we'll look at it in more detail. So looking at the left-hand side here, you can see sort of a side profile of the external pouch there, one of the 3 pockets around the back. And you can see the external stowage found down the side here. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute or two when we look at this in more detail, but you can see that detail there with this on the mannequin here. You can also see the shoulder straps coming up over the shoulder, and then they meet the body of the rucksack itself down here. They're stitched on there. You can also just see probably that the detail of the frame at the side there. Obviously we're going to have a look at that in a bit more detail as well. One of the reasons for looking at this laid out on the blanket is obviously you can't really look at the frame and so forth when it's on the mannequin like this. And looking at the straps coming over the shoulder here, you can see the padded section which comes over the shoulders. There's then a quick release system here which we'll look at in more detail in just a moment, and the buckles here which allow the straps to be adjusted in. So we'll look at all of these features in a bit more detail now. So looking at this as it is here, you can probably see why I wanted to show you it on the mannequin as well. It's a lot more difficult here to make out what all the different components are, but it will give us opportunity to talk through the various details of the design, and it's in a lot more detail than was possible on the mannequin. Of course, we can look at the opening, the closure of the main compartments and so forth. We're looking at this, obviously the back of this as it's carried basically, but the front, if you want to think of it that way. You can see here the main closure, which we'll talk about first. You have the straps coming up from the bottom here. The buckles are then stitched onto these straps about 2 inches up from the bottom, a little bit more. And then the closure straps for the main flap come down and loop back up through these. And you can see I've looped the loose ends of these through these little nylon loops on the main flap here. You can also see the detail here I mentioned previously of the various different colours of nylon used to manufacture this. That's probably been exacerbated a little bit by fading over the years, but you have even different colour of green on the Velcro section for the pocket in the flap, the flaps of the compartments around the outside here, the green of the straps for the main compartment, and then brown elsewhere, and more of a tan colour on the edging material used on the flaps of the 3 pockets around the front. So as I say, from that point of view, I think this is quite a visually nice example of the tropical rucksack. It's possibly a little bit easier to see that colour difference here in close-up. So we'll open up the main compartment with straps and buckles here, which are a little bit, there we go. These friction buckles are very good, and sometimes it's necessary to just carefully pass the straps back through them rather than pulling. There we go. Open this up. So the main compartment here opens up, and you can see we have waterproofing underneath the lid there. I'll show you the detail of the pocket in the flap. You can see there, and I'll just bring the light in slightly better angle to see into there. You can see of that waterproof material, waterproofed nylon material there, and then just the nylon duck that's used to make the rest of the main body of the rucksack in the top of the flap there, and then the touch and close fastener, which you can see in there. We have that waterproof material here, obviously the edging material, which is similar to that used on canteen covers and so forth. And then we have the closure for the main compartment here. We have a draw cord, which is made of basically of paracord, and you can see that here with the black fleck in it. See that there? And then a pull stop, which obviously when you want to pull this through, you can, and then to lock this off, you just push the two together and it locks it in position like that, as you can see. It locks this slider in position on the cord, just knotted at the end there. This runs through heavy duty blackened eyelets around the edge of the throat, as you can see there, to draw this in, and it's just tied off at the back there through the 2 rear eyelets, as you can see there. If I bring in the light again, we can see down into the main compartment here, just one large open compartment down inside there. You can see the reinforcement in here as well, where the outer pockets attach on. So you can see that there, using the nylon tape as a reinforcing material for where the pockets attach. That's particularly important because the pockets they're behind, they're actually loose, so you can pass things down behind them like machete sheaths and so forth. So we'll have a look at that in just a moment. Another thing to talk about while we're looking up around the throat area here is you have this webbing, this nylon webbing strip that passes all the way around. You can see it starts here at the side seam, runs all the way around to the other side seam here, and this has both eyelets in it for M1910 type hanger hooks as used on machete sheaths and so forth, and also you can pass slide keepers through here as well. And of course these are often seen in the later years of the war festooned with canteens and various other items attached on the outside, and this feature at the top here was a key part of that. And again, this is in this slightly lighter, almost mint green, mint chocolate chip ice cream green colour. It's a lot lighter green than the sort of olive green used for the rest of the rucksack. So just to note that there, that strap is a particularly light green, and again I like that feature. Moving on to talk about the outer pockets here, you can see, as I mentioned, these are actually hollow behind, so I can get my hand in there easily. It's an open channel behind each of these, as you can see there, all 3 of them. So you can carry a machete on whichever side you want, or even down the middle, and it will pass down behind here. Or an entrenching tool, for example, the handle of an entrenching tool could pass down there. You could attach the cover onto this strap around the top here. So that's an interesting feature of the outer pockets, and particular reason they need that reinforcement. If I sort of open these out here just with air to give you a better idea of the size of these, obviously we have seen them on the mannequin packed out. These are a good feature of the design, I would say, certainly in terms of the closure. The idea of this is you can adjust this in depending on what you're carrying in these, so there's quite a bit of adjustment there on the straps. Once it's adjusted in tight for what you're typically carrying in these, you can get into them by simply opening up the pocket using the snaps or press studs there. Now these are plastic, in common with the M1967 equipment, or certain parts of certain versions of the M1967 components use plastic rather than metal press studs or snaps, and that's true of this as well. Obviously it's closely associated with that design. I've seen some people say it's part of the design, the M1967, but I don't believe it received the M1967 designation as part of the actual nomenclature for this, but certainly that is a common feature with the M1967 equipment. And then the bottom of these pouches each has a large drainage eyelet, which you can see here, and that's painted aluminium. You can see those there. Talking more about the external stowage, we also have some external stowage on the sides here, and you can see we've got the end of the strap coming around near the throat up there. We then have 2 points here where you can attach straps, and then you have another section of this same webbing as we have up at the top here, down the centre of these two, with eyelets, and obviously the ability to pass slide keepers through there. So it's common to see a canteen carried down on the side of the rucksack as well. Now, I'd mentioned I'd added straps and things to this, and this is one of the reproduction straps from Saigon Logistics. I have 4 of these on the rucksack, and I believe they were initially issued with 4. And this is, as I say, a reproduction from Saigon Logistics, and this has the correct pattern of buckle. The strap should really be a nylon tape similar to this, used for the straps for closing the outer pockets. It's a little bit thicker than that, a little bit tougher, but nevertheless does the job very well. So I've attached several of these, and we'll see them as we look at this. These are reproductions, that's important to note. But you can see how they just pass through the nylon webbing on the side there, and then you can use these to carry an external load. I actually use these when I'm carrying the rucksack on a lightweight rucksack frame, which was occasionally seen later in the war, particularly in footage of the First Air Cav. I believe the First Air Cav did that quite a bit, and I've actually used these straps for that purpose, and they're very useful for that purpose. Using cord, of course, is another option there as well. So that's the side, the provisions for carrying extra kit on the side there. If we look at the other side, you can see we have the same, and I have another of the reproduction straps there. You have the same setup on this side, the 2 loops of webbing which you could pass a strap through here and here, and then we have the provision to carry something with slide keepers or hanger hooks off this centre section of webbing there. Before we look at the back, we'll just have a look at the base of this, where there is extra provision to carry a load underneath this, and you have 2 more of those sections of webbing which you can pass a strap through, and I have another couple of the reproduction straps there, as you can see. And these of course would allow you to carry something on the bottom of this. When I have this attached to a lightweight rucksack frame, I tend to loop these through the rucksack frame and also through whatever's been carried underneath. Generally have the air mattress and the poncho rolled up together underneath this. And you can see again, more drainage at the bottom here for the main compartment. So the main compartment has 2 drainage eyelets at the bottom here. Again, originally painted, but you can see here they are aluminium. The paint has worn off. If we flip this over, we can have a look at the back, or rather the section which is against the back. And you can also see, if we bring this up into camera here, the stamp is fairly clear on this one. You can see the DSA there and the rucksack tropical designation at the top. You have the manufacturer there as well, and that's all quite nice and clear. This particular example is dated 69. I had a previous example which was dated 68, but it was not in anywhere near as good condition as this, and didn't have the various different colours to it and so forth as well. So I'm much happier having this in the collection. I moved the other one on. I also had to fit some reproduction back pads and so forth to the previous one I had, and this one is all original, apart from the additional straps. And another feature we're going to talk about on the buckles of the shoulder straps as well. But as I say, I haven't had to add anything to the actual structure of the rucksack itself, just the additional carrying straps, really. The shoulder straps here you can see are fairly thinly padded, but they are made in a similar manner to the M1967 suspenders in that regard. You can see they are padded nylon. They have a quick release system with a tab here which passes through two loops, one of which attaches the shoulder strap to the lower part of the shoulder strap to the upper part of the shoulder strap, and you can see that there. There is simply a metal loop stitched on with a piece of nylon webbing there, nylon strap, which passes through this metal fitting on the end of the lower part of the shoulder strap there, which is riveted in place. There's another one here which is actually fixed in position, and then you simply pass this quick release tab through there. The quick release tab is again made of the nylon strap, the nylon sort of tape strap there you can see, and it's stiffened with a piece of plastic which you can just see the end of poking out there. So the quick release on both shoulder straps, and that functions in exactly the same way in both cases, and you can therefore dump this very easily. The buckles are the same as those you have for the main closure in terms of adjusting down the lower part of the shoulder strap, and it's actually possible to remove these. So the shoulder straps are really in three pieces. You have this section of strap coming up from the body of the rucksack, you have this quick release section here, and then obviously the upper part of the shoulder strap which attaches onto the top of the rucksack. One thing again which is a modification to this, or a restoration almost, is the fact that I've added on these pieces of nylon paracord, fibre 1 cord, and again this has the black fleck in it which would be correct for the period, and this is done to replicate what was originally found on these rucksacks. Most of them have lost this feature, but I wanted to reintroduce it to this one, so I've put that back on. Just add something to it visually, and I've put that on both buckles based on an example in a collection of a chap called Alex Allen, who's based in the UK, who has a very nice example of one of these in his collection, and I've just replicated that look from his, restored that bit of paracord to each of the buckles. Moving on to talk about the frame and the padding at the rear here. The frame is an X frame, very similar to that found on the Arven rucksack, of course, and you can see this fits in, if I undo, or the press stud was already undone actually, but this fits into this compartment at the top of the rucksack. You see there's a bit of rust there, which is not uncommon with these, unfortunately, but that snaps in place there and keeps that captive at the top. You then have straps which come down each side, and you can see they are tightened in with a buckle, just as the same design is used on the shoulder straps and the main closure, and then these hold these side padded sections in place. Strap just passes through these loops on the back, and that holds these in place on each side. You can see exactly the same on each side there. And then the frame comes down here and passes through these metal loops, which are stitched onto the rucksack using a section of nylon webbing on each side. You can see those there. So these hook on to this notched section on the bottom part of the frame here. And then this hip pad also hooks onto this section using these metal loops on each end. This is actually adjusted in, again, using a buckle here. So you put these metal loops on each end of the, well, you don't have to disassemble the whole thing. You can just loosen the buckle off, pull these out and unclip them. This strap is fully removable. You can remove this hip pad, no problem at all. The padded section is just stitched onto a section of the nylon webbing at the rear there. You can see that there, which then necks down to this 1-inch strap, which passes across the back here and is secured in place with the same sort of buckle as we've seen elsewhere. You can see the section of the frame passes all the way across the back there. So the frame itself is designed to give this some rigidity, and the idea is that when this is all adjusted in properly, the frame should bow away from the body. So the frame should not contact the body. It doesn't always work that way, and you often see photographs of these with extra padding, even cardboard on the back here to give a bit of extra comfort or attempt to gain a bit of extra comfort. These are not the best design in the world. They are well ahead of a lot of other designs that were around at the time. You could think for the late 1960s in terms of rucksacks and so forth. These weren't bad, but they were not a good design when considered by modern standards. Obviously modern load carrying equipment is far superior in many regards, or can be. Obviously there are still bad designs out there, but in terms of designs of rucksacks and so forth, the civilian market hadn't picked up in the way it has in recent years, certainly from the 1980s, 1990s onwards, and so there wasn't really anything to compare this to. But this, in terms of design, is not great, but it did the job, I guess you could say. And the tropical rucksack is an attempt to solve the problem which had obviously become very apparent in Vietnam, which was carrying a large enough load for the sort of operations which were being conducted, when the M9056 equipment, as designed, really didn't do that job very well. And obviously you had the lightweight rucksack, but this was an attempt to expand upon the load carrying capacity even more. So hopefully it's been clear enough looking at the various details of this here. So the final thing I'm going to talk about here in relation to the tropical rucksack are the waterproof liners that were produced for it. I don't have examples of Vietnam War era liners. These are post-war liners, and we'll see that on the DSA numbers here. The dates are given, of course. These are similar to those used with the tropical rucksack. I think there are detailed differences, but these nevertheless give you an idea of what those liners looked like and how they worked. This is one of the smaller examples for the outer pockets, and you can see the details here. Liner, rucksack, and then the DSA there gives the date of 1977. You have the NATO stock number there as well. Size 1, meaning it's one of the smaller liners, and then the manufacturer there, East Wind Industries Incorporated. And as you can see, waterproof pack liner bags. And you'd have 3 of these, or 3 similar to this, for the outer pockets. And you can see the instructions here. For this, you have the illustrations there, 1, 2. I can get these to not have too much glare on them. So you can see 2, 3, and stage 4 there. And then the instructions here, which I'll try and get nice and visible in shot. And you can pause here and read these should you wish to. And this is how you tie these off to get a waterproof container to put inside the pocket, the outer pockets of the rucksack. So as I say, one of the smaller liners here. Interestingly, it still uses the nomenclature rucksack in this instance, obviously manufactured in the later 1970s. And then I'll just show you detail of the ties as well there. You can see we have the ties sewn on there, and this is just flat nylon cord, almost like paracord, with the center section taken out of it basically and flattened out. We'll put that to one side, and we have the larger liner here. This has slightly different nomenclature. These are made of a ripstop nylon, which you can see here, which is then coated with this waterproofing material. And this particular example, they're changing the nomenclature to field pack, of course intended for use with the Alice pack. And you have the DLA number there with 93 as the date, the NATO stock number once again, and the size 3 there in this instance. And you have Harris Manufacturing Company Incorporated, waterproof pack liner bags. So I think this would be for the large Alice pack, the main compartment, I believe, but that really goes beyond my knowledge. You can see the glued seams and so forth there to keep this waterproof, and you basically have the same instructions reproduced there. And I believe certainly the instructions are what you would have seen printed on the earlier liners for the tropical rucksack. I think the instructions for tying these off and so forth was carried directly across. So these aren't, strictly speaking, accurate for use with the tropical rucksack. Obviously they post-date the use of the tropical rucksack, but they nevertheless allow me to sort of talk about the liners that were produced for use with that rucksack. And as I say, I believe the instructions seen here were carried across from the preceding design of liners used with the tropical rucksack. So that's the last thing to talk about here, is the waterproof liners for the rucksack. So there we are. That was an in-depth look at the US tropical rucksack, introduced in 1968, but becoming more common in the field by 1969, and then fairly common by the end of US involvement in Vietnam, or the involvement of US combat troops in Vietnam, I should say. They weren't used by all units in Vietnam, so just sort of research the unit you're particularly interested in portraying if you're interested in using one of these for reenacting or displays. But they were quite extensively used by the 1st Cavalry Division, interestingly enough. And as I say, sometimes carried on the lightweight rucksack frame, which is another interesting detail of these. The frame of these is really one of the downsides of it, I guess you could say, in terms of the overall design. And attaching one of these onto the lightweight rucksack frame not only gives a bit of a better support to it in terms of carrying it, but also gives even more external carrying capacity as well, with attaching things onto the frame as well as onto the body of the rucksack. So quite useful from that point of view, marrying the two elements of the different designs, basically the body of this rucksack and then the frame of the lightweight rucksack. And the thumbnail of this video actually shows that in the field with one of these simply slung over a lightweight rucksack. There were other ways they were attached, various different ways, but that's perhaps a topic for a future video. If you'd like to see that, or if you found this particularly interesting and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing going forward in general, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.